Hi, this is Nolan Vallier. I'm the assistant archivist at the Seuss Archives and Center for American Music, and Scott Schwartz, our director of the center. Today is Thursday, August 7th, 2025. I'm here with Shelley Masar, Jeff Machota, and Marten Stromberg. And I want to start with a couple of introductions, if you can. Anybody can start. It doesn't matter who would like to start, but briefly, whoever would like to start, could you spell your name for us, and then briefly tell us who you are, and then we'll hop over to the next person?
I'll start. Shelley Masar, Shelley Washburn Masar. And what I have a need to assert is that the ideas behind Nature's Table as a jazz venue came from the brain of an intense woman who had studied art and the sociology of leisure. And one of the things I'd studied was jazz as a subculture, a subculture that valued big ears, that valued improvisation, that knew its interdependence on each other. It was a culture that was in resistance to, black musicians in resistance to the racism of their time from the 20s on. That it was America's classical music form. There were two, modern dance, which I was, and jazz. Those were the two quintessentially American art forms, yes? And both were in resistance to aspects of European culture. Both were in resistance to the moral majority, the libertarian bedrock that is America, which is so manifest now. Nature's Table opened in 1979. Ronald Reagan just came to office and began this whole process of funneling the wealth of the nation upward at the expense of the rest of us. So the idea was that I had learned in studying jazz as a subculture and art as subcultures is that artistic subcultures need three things. They need venues, they need audiences at those venues, and they need feedback. So I knew coming to town in 1975, I found Ron DeWar, right? And this was incredible music. This was awesome music. I'd never heard music like this. And he had no place to play. He would play at a place called Pickles.
The Ground Round.
The Ground Round for like three people, me and two other people, you know. So told Terry, no, look, this is what we have to do. We have to get a piano. We got the best piano we could get, Mason and Hamlin. We need to have recording stuff so that musicians can play there, can record themselves and get that kind of feedback. And the scene, the location with any restaurant, it's location, location, location. And it was right there. The music building was right up the way. People could bring their basses, they could bring their horn. Trino's had a traditional jazz, was a venue at the time. Remember Trino's? Anyway. So the musicians just came, and the doors were open. And so, a Sunday afternoon would be Ron DeWar playing with Bill Westcott, who was a Moldy Fig. Moldy Figs are those musicians who liked the music before bebop, yeah? And so the trad jazz scene, that's what DeWar and his band, the Memphis Nighthawks, had been so incredibly invested in. And I should probably, so that's what it set out to do, to offer them a venue, to offer them, so we advertised. And I want you to see this, and maybe copy it in the archives, because this publicity was very funky. It was all hand-done, handmade. It was based not on branding, but on a genuine love for the music. And that was the radical thing about the music. It was music that existed for the values of the music. That was a radical contretemps to the bullshit that was coming out of the Reagan administration. you know, and then the people like Machota came and organized around apartheid, organized around the anti-chief, and the walls were given over to that so that it was a place that intensely and consciously and intentionally harvested resistance artistically, politically, and in every other way. And and I'll stop.
I think this is one of the themes that we're really interested in discovering today, and hopefully Jeff and Marten, you can jump in here as well to talk a little bit about your experiences both with Nature's Table and then collectively. And I know none of us were really associated with the Iron Post, but we're really interested in trying to figure I want to know more about that as we go. But then also the Rose Bowl and thinking about these three spaces as living spaces, as breathing parts of the community, and how they manifested a relationship between the Champaign-Urbana community and the University of Illinois and a larger national scene. And we're really interested in sort of discovering that. Maybe Jeff, you'd like to hop in with this, with your experiences.
Sure. So I came here in the fall of 1984 as a student, which that didn't really last very long, lasted a couple of years. But I had scoped out on one of those parent field trips they bring you on. I let my parents do the field trip, and I split off, and I saw the Channing Murray Foundation, Red Herring, and I saw Nature's Table. They were both closed. And then I ended up at Trino's to have a sandwich. I was like, okay, these are the places that I kind of want to check out. And so I lived at Allen Hall, and within the first week I went to Nature's Table. And I was already going there, checking out music, learning everything. I ended up getting a job there by the end of the summer of 1985. And then I worked there till the very last day in spring of 1991. So there's lots of stories, of course. But to hit some of those things, one of the great things about Nature's Table was its location. So it was a campus location. Some of us tried to get Nature's Table 2 going a couple times and couldn't find a location because we had, at least in the later years, so I was in the second phase, so fall of 79 to the mid-'80s, and then I came in the mid-'80s. And the restaurant part of it really started to happen. We'd have lines out the door every day at lunch, and lots of people from the buildings around, because we were right and there was not a lot of places to eat. So it became a point where that was sustaining the business, the lunchtime business, the food business, and the music could be wonderful on the weekends. It could be full, but I worked Tuesday nights, and that was big band night at Trino's up the block. So there'd be some amazing Tuesday nights, and there'd be like 10 people in there. And
most
we were
of the musicians.
Yeah. And it would be Doc Scott or Kevin Kaiser playing beautiful, amazing music, but with very few people. So we were sustained by the lunchtime thing. So there was that balance that was necessary to keep it going. So, but one of the things I found unique, and this is what Marten can talk on later. And I'm not so sure about the Iron Post or even the Rose Bowl, but because Nature's Table was open from lunch to the late evening, people hung out there. People who worked there hung out.
It was open from 9 in the morning, though, too.
Kind of, yeah, maybe.
Had coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Things are fuzzy.
You had breakfast there as well?
No.
Well,
No.
not breakfast, but coffee.
Yeah.
And
cookies
bread and cookies and stuff.
We were getting ready for
from
that.
9 to 1, 7 days a week.
Well, Sundays didn't open early.
No, Sundays.
So there were
But
fairly regulars there then that just
There
would
were
hang
there were
out.
there were regulars, and
Yeah.
and so who were the regulars? So you had dancers, because the Cranard was across the street, and you had musicians, you had professors, you had activists who were doing political work on campus, and musicians, and then that makeup, a lot of them worked behind the bar or behind the counter at lunchtime as well. So a lot of us ended up hanging out there afterwards and coming back at night. So there's a lot of things that I know are in here that were at Mabel's and other places that were happening while I was here. And I saw some of those shows, but it's like, well, where was I? I was either at a meeting doing organizing, or I was at Nature's Table, either working or hanging out. So that's where we were a lot. So there was a community that developed, and it was a community that was open to lots of different things. There were art openings that happened that Shelley would organize, and we'd have an artist, Shelley would organize it, put up the art, and then we'd have an opening, and Terry would get a bunch of brie cheese. We'd have the bread that we made. Terry would get jugs of cheap wine, and then those of us who worked there, we would get it all set up, and there would be this opening, and there would be sometimes music would play, and there would just be a thing to celebrate it. And I don't know if anybody ever sold any art off the walls. I'm sure somebody did every once in a while, but it was, and then the art stayed up for a while. So there was a mixture of everything. And as Shelley mentioned later on, so I was involved in the anti-apartheid movement. A bunch of people worked there, were involved in that, and then later in organizing around the racist mascot on campus, and then organizing around the first Gulf War. That was a hub. We could go there and we could meet. And Terry was even involved in helping out with some of the stuff. And then T-shirts were on the walls. We were selling T-shirts for the Native American students.
This is Terry Masar.
Terry Masar, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was not only open to all these different people, but then people felt comfortable to hang out there and to be there. So.
It's an open, comfortable space. Yeah. I wonder, is it a similar sort of environment, Marten, at the Iron Post, from your experiences there?
Iron Post is different. The Iron Post didn't have those kinds of hours. And I guess to kind of give you an overview of my time there really quickly to connect, there is like an intermediate, like Sweet Betsy's was open for some time. They do music there?
Yeah, kind of.
Never really happened.
I wouldn't
really
really,
happens.
I would say that, so before you jump in.
Yeah.
I was involved
Very
in
connected
the Champaign-Urbana Jazz and Blues Association,
Yeah.
which formed out of the ashes of Nature's Table.
keep
And that
it
was our
alive.
idea, was to try to find venues, hustle venues to do stuff. And then there was the Blind Pig, where I ended up working for a while,
Right.
that did a lot of stuff. And that was much broader. But what didn't have was like the food component in that component. But there was things from rock to blues to jazz to indie rock to punk to African to everything there. But that was in downtown Champaign, and that
the
was
Embassy, I don't know how much they carried on. They had live music there, but I don't know how much jazz was really going on at the
they
Embassy.
didn't do jazz. It was mostly
Okay.
Keith Harden on
There's
Tuesday.
a Smile Politely article about the Jazz Cafe. Is that a venue? No, not.
So let me
Yeah,
so
we can
I'll
talk about
jump
that.
in.
This leads up to the Iron Post, right? I mean,
Also the Weft piece, Jeff. I mean, this guy he and Helgeson kept the scene alive after the table, right after it was closed in
Yeah.
91.
Yeah.
and that's a
Until
9-year
before.
gap from 91. The Iron Post, I think, opened in 2000.
Opened in 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I was booking jazz at a bunch of different venues. I booked jazz at Zorba's, which had done jazz
Right. Yep.
in the 70s and had stopped. And then Val, one of my coworkers and a
Table.
friend of ours at Nature's Table, when she started working there, she got things going. But it was one night a week.
And they had a regular Wednesday or Thursday, right? It was
Thursday
night.
night,
Yeah,
yeah.
there was a regular jam or like session there.
And then when Paul started doing the Iron Post, he graciously didn't do jazz on the same night that we did jazz.
Yeah.
Because it would be a conflict.
Yeah.
So it was cool about that. But I would really say, I mean, nobody would have thought that the Iron Post would have lasted so long. I don't think.
I'm amazed.
Because the scene had different places to go. Like the Blind Pig picked up a lot of stuff, though it wasn't at all. It was crucial, but it was very different. Then Paul Worth was working at the Embassy, which did.
He was a part owner there.
Yeah, they did Keith Harden a lot. They did acoustics because it was tiny. I mean, it was super tiny.
Yeah. And before
And-
the Embassy, Paul had worked at hotels, and he was booking live music at, I forget which hotel he was working at, but he was doing some booking there also.
And while he was working there, 2 doors away, this space which had been vacant for a long time started off as the Jazz Cafe. So some of us met with the people who were going to start it up. They asked for our advice, and then they ignored every single piece we gave.
They had the idea of an elegant place where people would go in full dress and have a big city jazz
But
scene.
why pay $5 or $6 to hear somebody you could hear for $1 or $2 earlier in the week? And the answer is, who's going to do that? Nobody. And so they had all these ideas. I mean, they're part of the reason that there was no taps in the bar. And
Yeah. There was a
Now-
club there before, too, right? Like Napsaram something there?
No, so Jazz Cafe lasted a year or two. Then it became Blues Creation.
Right, Blues Creation was whatever.
and then it became blues creation slash country bar.
Right. It was
then
a
it was
Troca. What was it? What was it called? I'm trying to remember the name of the country bar that was there. I wasn't here at the time.
yeah. It was a mess. You know.
Yeah.
So then Paul took it over in 2000, and he got adopted. He started trying to do things a little bigger, but realizes the space is tiny. And that's around the same time that the U of I, almost exactly the same time, Chip McNeil came here, and the jazz program
Yeah.
got really institutionalized.
That's right.
And they ended up having a mutual relationship that Paul leaned into.
It's a really weird space though, because I mean we're seeing some photos from early Iron Post. They have the full big band in that
Yes.
really tiny little.
That's
space.
the first time I was there. Was to see. So I came here in 2000. That was the year the Iron Post opened.
Oh,
And I probably saw one of the first big band shows there. I had done some like jazz vocal performance. I almost went to college for jazz vocal. I ended up coming here and studying philosophy instead. But my roommates, my sophomore year, but they were my brother's roommates. My freshman year when I was here at the dorms, they were all jazz majors. And at that time, Shab was running the jazz program. I don't know if you got Thomas Wardle. And you know, he'd come out to our house parties and he'd be hanging out at our, and you know, Ari Brown and Rick Temple were here, and Darren Garvey, those were my friends. They were working at,
I know Ari.
yeah, you know, Ari was here for a long time, and Darren was here for quite a while also, but they were all working at the Italian restaurant on campus. I'm sorry, I can't.
Timponi's.
Timponi's.
Yeah.
And they'd have big cook parties. The jazz bands would come over there and hang out at our house. He'd be cooking for everybody. Shab would be there. And so my first experience was going to see one of their big band performances, one of the school big bands at the Iron Post. And I remember very vividly seeing that Miles Davis poster that's on the wall. You know, I'm 18 years old and it's my first time at like a jazz club sort of vibe, you know, and like it was like a really great experience for me. And then, yeah, I remember going to see Chip's interviews, that open interviews for the different candidates that came in. And, you know, what's something that people still talk about in terms of the strength of the program is that Chip McNeil came in and insisted on having a doctoral program here as part of a condition for his hire.
Yeah.
And so that was something that really, you know, changed the quality and like the amount, like the size of the program.
Can I jump
Yeah,
in?
please,
Because I
please.
have no short-term memory and
Yeah,
I'll
absolutely.
forget, and
Yeah.
I assume you do.
Yeah.
John Garvey had been running the jazz scene when DeWar came up, and Jim McNeely and Cecil Bridgewater, the Lions that came out of the U of I jazz program. He'd been a violist. He had idiosyncratic ideas about no amplified basses and so on. He was a true boheme. He would hang out at Trino's, and everybody he fostered were radically indifferent to the likes of a PhD program, and they weren't just technicians that could bray endless scales at rapid temperatures, tempi. And the musicians, the faculty, Ray Sasaki, Morgan Powell, Sal Martirano, Herbert Brun, would come and hang out at Nature's Table. Jeff saying this was part of the campus community. When they closed it down, eminently domained it, we had thousands of people saying it had been a school without walls, where teachers and jazzers could hang out, and they hung out, and they jammed, and they had pickup bands, you know, and so it was, the pulse of it was something. And then Shab had been a head of music for Rajneesh at the compound, you knew that, in the, what was that compound, the Rajneesh compound.
We won't talk about how he's a Trumper now.
We won't talk about
Shab's
that.
a weird guy. I've seen a lot
Shab
of
is a
stories about Shab.
genuinely weird guy, and his orgies in India.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
because it was all about, you know, body, mind stuff.
Yeah, Osho.
But-
He was out at
Osho.
Osho. I
Yeah.
remember going into his house and he had pictures of
Yeah.
like Osho and like
And
other.
he has stories that he will gladly tell you
Yeah.
about being trained up in Osho's shoes in India.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Not to diverge too
Character.
much,
Yes.
but we're talking about the U of I jazz program. So maybe there were people who didn't want to get a degree, but what a byproduct of it was that jazz people who came here to play with John Garvey, to play with Ray Sasaki, to play with Ron Duar, they had to become composition majors.
Yeah.
And so therefore there was that they learned different skills. Not all of them wanted that, and some of them didn't make it through that. And it wasn't until, and Schab, Tom Berkner, Ed Thigpen, these were all the post-Garvey people who really didn't have a program that respected what they were doing.
That's absolutely right.
Because they didn't respect Garvey either, but Garvey's force of nature forced them to do that. So when the Chip McNeil era happened, a combination of the School of Music opening their minds up, and then students could now come here for degrees in jazz performance and jazz composition.
One of the real benefits, I think, that I saw over the 20 years that I was spending time at the Iron Post was that you get these performers who are from New York, who are making their living as performers in major cities, coming back as they get older in their career and getting a degree so that they can then teach.
Right.
And so you
So
get
they
these
have
really
insurance.
amazing, Matt Hughes and Whitney Ash example of during the 2010s or whatever, they were both living in New York City, making their living as full-time performers, and end up coming back here through the program because it's one of the few PhD programs around where they can move into that avenue and become academics. And of course, these guys are academics already because they're dedicated to the craft. They know the musicians, they know the history, they study, but coming in and finalizing, doing composition on a regular basis, participating in all these different ensembles, composing for ensembles, and having this body of other talented individuals to work with that are here just to do that during that period of time.
And partially too was the collapse of the jazz scene nationally.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
yeah.
people are like, I need some paper.
Yeah, absolutely.
and this was the place where they could get some paper. So that sets the stage for the Iron Post.
Right.
And at that point too, Paul had not yet put his thumbprint. The very first performance was Jeff Helgeson, I think, was the very first band to play.
Yeah, was it? Yeah.
Because he had been talking with Paul. But at that point, there wasn't the nice open area. There wasn't a patio outside. There wasn't the windows, really. There was these little stages at different ends. And Paul eventually was able to change that as he... Though Paul, again, just like Terry and Shelley, were not owners of the space.
Right.
They were renters. So
Big mistake.
Yeah.
Well, but big mistake, but sometimes only option.
Only option. That's definitely only option.
There's people who won't sell, you can't buy from. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, starting like I said, 2000. I guess that's the opening of the Iron Post. I was there. I spent time there to see my friends who played or students in the jazz program here, and I saw the transition from Schab to Chip McNeil to kind of bring things back. And I mean, that was the place eventually that the student groups, and I don't know exactly what year it would have been, that the student groups were all landing there. I mean, the university.
It was only a couple years after it got going. I mean,
exactly. I think once Chip was there and really building the program and bringing other faculty in, basically the university held all of their student performances at the Iron Post.
Yeah.
That they couldn't land at Cranor. They had their end of the year stuff, as they still do at Cranor, but. And I can't speak to exactly what the schedule was because it wasn't until 2015 that I became involved with booking the Iron Post and very intimate with the schedule. I mean, my girlfriend at the time in 2005 worked there as a bartender, and so I was there.
Who was that?
Bobby, remember Bobby?
Bobby.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so, I was still going there. I wasn't going there as much at that time, but yeah, I mean, they had jazz programming. They had the combos. The big band performances were there regularly, several times a semester.
Yep.
They had, I think, every Thursday at some point did start to do U of I performances. That might be after Zorba stopped.
Well,
I don't know
after
exactly
I
the
stopped
timing.
being involved in Zorbas,
Right,
and it kind of
there you
turned. There was a kind of a shit show period for a couple of years.
Right, and
I got second guessed, and once I got second guessed by the owner, it's like, no. It's like, I do this for fucking peanuts and some Cracker Jack, and you don't fucking change my schedule. So
he would have the faculty showcase at the start of every semester.
Yep.
There was faculty shows alternating every Wednesday. So there was a long run of SSG, which is Chip Stevens, Joel Spencer, and Larry Gray. Chip McNeil had a standing gig there that was once a month on Wednesdays. And
then the Friday jazz happy hours, which
the Friday jazz happy hours were a big thing. Those still continue at the Rose Bowl now.
those go back to Nature's Table,
Yeah.
carried over to the Blind Pig, carried over to the Iron Post, carried
Yeah.
over to the Rose Bowl. So having a Friday jazz happy hour has been institutionalized for a long time.
And who's all been involved with the Friday Jazz Happy Hour? Is it?
Just, I mean, whoever. I mean, it's just a tradition.
Jeff's been doing it Jeff Ellison's been doing it a really long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of performances, like, is it mostly U of I faculty, or is
No.
it?
No, I would say no. I mean, as far as the happy hours that I saw, none of the groups that really played happy hour were U of I affiliates. It was all community. I mean, of course, the U of I faculty and students are members of the groups that would play,
Yeah.
but generally that wasn't the case. It was community groups.
Though a lot of the community folks, it's waning in some ways because people are passing,
Yeah.
and then now that a lot of the students who come in are getting jobs because you can't survive. Like in the 80s, in the 70s and 80s, and even the 90s, you could survive being a musician, working part-time at Trino's or part-time at Nature's Table, and hanging out in the quad, and maybe going to some rallies and protests, and still pay the rent and have money left over.
Right.
That's not how things work anymore. So.
Yeah. How do you see the clientele and the folks that are patrons that are coming to the Rose Bowl differ from, say, those that were at the Iron Post?
Yeah, well, I can talk a little bit about my actual time, like booking the Iron Post from like 2015 until I bought the Rose Bowl in 2019. I was there for about 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And
That's all?
Yeah, I know, right? I was going there. I was a regular there, like a real, true regular at the Iron Post for 4 years.
So some of us would make comments about Iron Post workers and say, these people could have worked at Nature's Table. And that was usually meant as a compliment. And Martin's one of the people we said he could have worked at Nature's Table.
I think Paul was really reluctant to hire me. He hired me out of desperation. And I was a regular there for about 4 years, and I love jazz and I love live music, and I was there all the time, and it was sparse. Like the crowds there in the evenings were sparse. If there wasn't a show, there weren't a ton of people there, but it was a very intimate environment. And I didn't really get to know the clientele that was there, the regular clientele that I know now, until I started working there. And then when you're working there, it's a kind of crazy job. It's you're running the bar, you're running food, you're like serving tables. You're not just like a bartender behind a bar. Like I was waiting on people like hand and foot. Like it's like literally every table you're serving. You're also at the bar serving drinks, and then you're serving every table. So you get to know everyone like very personally. It's like you're very close and like talking and meeting everyone. And when I started there, it was like, oh, it's always this transition of like, oh, you're the new guy. Like, like someone has left. And there's like, it's a bizarre thing to like get in that way as part of a job to become a community member of this community that's been long-standing since the 70s, of these people that have known each other for decades in the context of coming out to live music.
Yeah.
And then getting sort of become part of that is just a really strange experience.
I was always the youngest person in the crowd at a lot of gigs at Nature's Table, and then I'd go to these gigs at the Iron Post, especially if there was like Morgan Powell and Ray Sasaki were doing a reunion, and I'd be like, I'm still the youngest motherfucker in here. How the fuck is that happening? It's like fucking 25 years later.
Yeah, it's a good point that you bring up, and it was maybe a later question that I wanted to ask. But what can the both of you tell me about these reunions that took place for the Nature's Table reunions? I know some took place at the Iron Post, others took place at Canopy Club.
Mike and Molly's.
Mike and Molly's was the first one, I think. What can you recall about the reunions?
Just to put a place marker about memory thing, we need to
Yeah.
talk about Paul Worth's
Absolutely,
personality.
yes, absolutely.
Personality
Absolutely.
and who
Yeah.
he loved and what he loved and what he
Yeah.
maybe didn't love. But go on.
So Terry had started.
Die.
To what?
To die.
No, not yet. Terry started coming back out, and he hadn't done music. Sweet Betsy's became kind of a big weight around his neck. And when it finally closed and he got to do different things, he started going out to hear music again. With our mutual friend Paul Winkie and myself, other people, he would go out. He decided to do a table reunion, and he decided he was going to do it. And Mike and Molly's, and it was crazy. It was in the beer garden, and it was sold out. There were people trying to get in. So then I wasn't really involved at the beginning planning stages, and I was like, Terry, why the fuck wasn't I involved at the very beginning? And then the next time I was like, well, we got to do bigger next time, and let's try to do campus. So we did the Canopy Club, which was a fucking mistake. Because that place it's big, it's dark, it's dank, it's nothing like Nature's Table.
It's not intimate in the way that, like Mike and Molly's Beer Garden.
Yeah, and I thought too big, we thought too structured, tried to do guarantees because we want to get people to get paid. And then, I mean, the people who came to that, some people came only to like one, enjoyed it. They thought it was great, and it was great. But as an organizer of it, I was like, oh, God damn it, we're gonna have to ask people to not take as much money as we promised them, and and all this. And so then afterwards, it's like, you know what, fuck it. The Iron Post is the natural place to do this, and we did the last three before Terry died at the Iron Post, and that actually it really worked. Because did we overfill it? Sure. Were people able to go out in the patio? Yes, that was great. It was like perfect weather each time. It worked out great. After Paul passed, I had posted some things. There was a lot of, and this we can segue back to this. There was a lot of. Paul was a prickly person. I went to the embassy like 2 or 3 times a week for years when he was the bartender. Didn't even get a fucking acknowledgement of anything. And then finally, at one point, it cracked open, and we started to talk. And he respected the jazz community. He did enjoy it. Sometimes he'd be in the back, in the kitchen, super grumpy. But something amazing would come out. He'd just come out, and you could see the look in his eye, and it's like he understood what he was putting on there, and he knew what it was. He knew what was of value, and he really, not just for the Nature's Table reunions, but we did multiple benefit concerts there, memorials there, and Paul was, we had a couple memorials scheduled right before the lockdown happened, as well. So he was very open to that stuff, and because of that, the table reunions were we should have done all of them except the Mike and Molly's one there, and we would have done more. Then we did Terry's memorials there as well. So,
Shelley, what do you recall about this, about the reunions?
I was still angry that the U of I had said, I took the petitions in, and they the Chancellor Morton Weir said, oh, it's going to be okay. You'll be able to get a new space in the enterprise zone that's going to be developed between Goodwin and Lincoln Avenue that happened 30 years later, and their complete indifference to what it was. I remember going to a talk with Emil Donchin, who was head of psychology, and
we organized that.
They were talking, and he said, they were so glad to get rid of that place. So the memories around it, I loved the people who worked there. Jeff, Liz, Lisa Dixon. So seeing them again, it was just one Val, that was
It's about
our
the
marriage.
people.
Now the end of the table left a family of 4 without income.
Yeah.
And
Family of 6.
Well, that's right, 4 children, 2 of us. And so it was a death knell, literally. And so there's anger in what I have to say and how I experienced it. Jeff and Helgeson, they organized it. I remember you as organizing. I forgot that Terry was even involved, that it was his idea at first to have the table reunion. I thought this was
So
all
the
you.
relationship was Terry would come up with things for Jeff to do.
Yeah. Jeff.
and so that's usually how it worked. And it'd be reaching out to people. I was like, Terry, you need to reach out to this person. 'Cause I didn't have that relationship, and that so.
So Jeff ran the point guard. Yeah.
One of the things I remember about the reunions, and this kind of ties into what Marten was talking about, being behind the bar. So I did a lot of political organizing on campus and the community for many, many years. And so people know you,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know them. They're like, oh, I know that guy. That's Half Tuna Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
That's Quarter Gondola Clark. That's people buy their drinks or buy their
Absolutely,
sandwiches, and you don't necessarily remember their names, or like, oh, that's Steve Edelman's girlfriend. It takes you 30 years to learn her real name.
But one of the things venues do is they come for the cookies, they come for the booze, they come for the coffee, they come for those things.
Yeah.
That has to be part of the mix
Right.
of what,
But at the reunions, I recall people coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Jeff, do you remember me?" More than one person did this. And it's like, come on, man. This is like 25, 30 years ago. And I figured out a couple, and then one person's like, oh, yeah, you didn't like me very much back then. And I'm like, oh, come on. And she was one of the short-lived cooks. But so we should take it back to Marten, because we're still in the 2000s.
Sure. Yeah, in the 2000s. Like I said, I came on to work at the Iron Post in 2015. I'd been working at the U of I library for a number of years, and I was there on a 3-year term position, and I could have left for another library job, but my brother lived here, and this is just one of those towns that really grabs hold of you, at least for me, or brings people come back all the time. It's kind of crazy. But the Iron Post was not doing very well when I came on, and Paul had needed employees pretty badly, and that's why he hired me, again, out of desperation. I was coming back from an interview at Wash U, and I got a text from Warner, who's a long-time regular of live jazz, live music, and supporter. And he sent me a now hiring, and then I texted Paul. I'm like, hey, do you need somebody? Like, I'm looking for work right now. I'm out of work. And he's like, can you start today? And I want to say that was a Wednesday, or it might have been a Friday happy hour, and he gave me a bottle of liquor full of water to practice my pour count, and then it was me and him my very first day at Rush. He threw me to the wolves.
Wow.
Like, I was solo.
Who was playing?
I'm trying to remember it's hard for me to remember what show it was, because my brain was just...
But it was super crowded.
It was packed. The patio was open, and I'm doing my first day of table service and bar service. And anyway, he really needed employees. I got my brother a job there shortly after, because he needed people.
I wasn't sure what came first.
And yeah, my brother started there I started in like May, and my brother started it in December of 2015, maybe a little earlier, November or something. And I was trying to get involved. I had already been booking. I did variety shows in Chicago, and I've done a lot. I did events with the library. I ran like a James Joyce event. That was regular, and a number of other events. And so I was interested in booking. I'd already done like my own basically production, like putting events together and that kind of thing. And I was trying to get Paul to let me do it, and he wouldn't. He was really, really guarded. He's the kind of guy that like really doesn't want to let anybody else do the things that he is used, even if it's going to help him. He doesn't. It's hard for him to like let go. My brother complained about how slow shifts were for so long that I'm like, Paul, let me book these days, so my brother will stop complaining to me about how slow his shifts are. And through the course of maybe that next 6 months of 2016, and I think Paul had been at this point earlier in the Iron Post career, where the venue was having live music, most nights of the week. But we really worked it up between he and I. That place was booked again, similar to what the Rose Bowl does now, 7 days a week.
I think he was burnt out at that point.
I believe that's exactly right.
Yeah.
He needed the help, even if he couldn't take it. He really needed it, and so, I was able to help him to bring some more life back to the place during this time that, like, I think he was on the verge of going out of business when he hired me.
Yeah.
And so, through an extra effort of like really,
I'll leave the Rose Bowl out of this, but being on the verge of going out of business is a business model for many places. And it was for Nature's Table for years, so as well. So
yeah, and so like we brought it back to the point where there was live music every night of the week except Monday, which was Paul's day off. Mm-hmm. And so since he was the sound engineer at the and you can't see I guess the camera's on, so he was the sound engineer at the Iron Post. So he was also very reluctant to give up even sound engineering responsibilities, which he knew kind of how to like set the mics and stuff, but That was the extent of.
Who was in charge of that at the table? Who did the?
Nobody.
Nobody?
Well, whoever.
Was it,
I
was
mean-
it all acoustic? Everything
So-
was acoustic?
Well, we
early-
always had everybody record themselves, so
Yeah.
we had that possibility. So there was the microphones that existed in that day.
Yeah.
It was primarily acoustic, but there was a small little PA, but it was just, for years it was just a microphone and a couple speakers, because it was a small space.
Yeah.
Many years later, my dad helped Terry get a little
Speakers.
mixer and some speakers, and but it was just, it would be Terry or whoever. It would just, he'd set it and that was it, you know.
Terry was an athlete. He was MVP punter at the U of I. He liked playing. He knew how to play with guys. He liked Machota.
Yeah.
They played, you know, everybody played. He would jump over the counter, and there was fun. It was banter. You know, Paul couldn't do that with you. He
That's
couldn't
right.
get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's just different working personalities. then.
different physicalness,
Yeah.
different ways of inhabiting a body and
Yeah.
being a man.
And
I
being a
don't-
member of a community. Even. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if there's a time limit that we have.
Okay, shut up.
No,
it's
no,
all
no,
good.
not at all.
It's all good.
I just,
No,
I just
this
want to
is
make
good.
sure we get to the Rose Bowl. I want us to.
Yeah,
I want us,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not rushing. I'm not
Yeah,
rushing, but
I'm
I just
not
don't want us
rushing.
to say, "Oh, we
Yeah.
got 5 minutes
I
left."
think
Yeah.
I think we're doing fine here.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, we can get back to you said like I mean, Paul and I. It took me a while to even break through to. Paul and I were friends. You know, we had a falling out at the end, but we were, I would say, good friends. I mean, weird stuff happened. There was one night where he and I were sitting outside having this conversation. You said we want to talk about Paul and his musical interests, and he was very interested in the early jazz scene, like the black jazz scene that was happening in Champaign at people's houses
Yeah.
and at these smaller clubs.
He
And
knew
I-
about that. That's
Oh
surprised.
yeah, I mean, because he talked to people. He really had an interest in the history, and when there were people that came into the bar that he knew were around in the earlier time, he would talk to them and try to learn more about the history of music in Champaign-Urbana. So even though people wouldn't think of him as a conversationalist, with the right people, he really opened up and was very curious about the history of music in Champaign. And we were having a conversation one night where we were talking about, he's like, someone needs to do a documentary on the early history of the performers that came through here in the 40s and the 50s. And some crazy guy hit him in the back of the head with a piece of concrete. And I'd played that night. I was dressed head to toe, you know, and I chased the guy down, you know, with a couple other, you know, people sitting in the patio followed me. And, you know, I think before that and after that experience, especially, like, we had a kinship, you know, that was more than just
Who hit him
and
in the head?
some crazy guy, like,
remember
had a
when that
bag full of
happened.
rocks
I wasn't there.
and had like an umpire vest on, or a catcher's vest on, and weird stuff happens in bars. But you know, we had a good, and I played his club before I started working there too, with my group for a number of years. But
Yeah.
that's just, you know, we broke through in terms of relationship when we started, you know, booking collaboratively in early 2016, and we became good friends.
The racial
that
piece
time.
about black music in Champaign-Urbana is one that should be explored. Too
Oh,
bad
yeah.
Russell Cheatham is dead, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
he told that story and he, by the way, said of Nature's Table, told Terry that there was a period when he felt it was the only band downstate that a black man could book without a white front man. So, and that Paul was interested in that.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating
Yeah.
to me.
It was maybe a table reunion, or it was some gig where it was in between sets and we're sitting out at the Iron Post patio, and it was myself, I think Debbie Sheldon may have been there, but it was Russell Cheatham, who was the organist from Sorghum for many years and who was from town, Candy Foster, blues singer, and Lamont Parsons, guitar player. And the stories that they were telling about the black history of music in Champaign-Urbana and
Bridgewaters.
Danville, and you know,
Oh, yeah.
Military
talking
bands.
about you know, when George Benson would came through one summer with Jack McDuff, these McDuff stories, Count Demon, all these things. It was one of those
Yeah.
things where it's just like, I wish I could record this moment, you know, somehow without, you know, being obtrusive or whatever. It's just it was an amazing thing, and then to go to the Paul thing. Sometimes I'd show up early at happy hour. I'd be done working, so I'd show up, be sitting out in the patio, and then Paul would come out and all of a sudden just start talking, and like talking about like the music stuff. He's like, oh, I got this CD. This is something that so and so was on talking, and then all of a sudden, it would get like, I don't know if you are familiar with petting a cat. Sometimes they get overstimulated. All of a sudden, Paul would realize he was like having too much of a conversation. And he'd go, gotta go. And he'd get up and just leave. So it'd be like, okay, I've reached a stimulation point. And it's like, I was like, wow, that was really out of the blue. What just happened there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't really get to the transition to the Rose Bowl, but I purchased the Rose Bowl in March of 2019, or I was working on buying it, and I was trying to sort of take over the reins at the Iron Post as well, which I think would have probably killed me. But similarly, when we opened the Rose Bowl, we didn't book any jazz, and that's something that we did because the Iron Post was still there. And like that was the lifeblood of that place. I mean, Paul had jazz 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week. There was Thursday university ensembles, Friday jazz happy hour. There was the Wednesday faculty shows and the Wednesday jazz jam that I think was started by Clark Gibson and Nick Schroeder maybe as that regular jam. And that was when the Zorbas had sort of stopped. There wasn't really the Zorba sessions going on. There was like in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, I think, when Nick Schroeder, I think that's the story. Is that Nick Schroeder?
I think Nick actually booked Zorbas for a little while, I believe.
He did, yeah. He was over there too.
And then there was some fucking trombone player who took it over at the end and fucked it up. I can't remember who that guy's name was. I don't remember your name, trombone player.
But we didn't really. It was really until Paul passed that was in 2021. Is that right?
It was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was either
I consider him a victim of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
The isolation.
No, he didn't die from COVID, but he was a victim of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was in 2021, and then that was when we sort of reached out to kind of, because the Post closed. Yeah. I tried to keep it open actually after he passed, but just due to like the nature of not owning the building and these rental agreements and the building owners being ready to sell. They're at sort of the end of their career, and they were ready to sell the building, so they didn't really want anyone to take over the space that might inhibit the sale, to have some kind of lease in place. So I wasn't able to sort of continue the tradition there, and so I, reached out to Jeff Helgeson, and I think we talked at that time, and we just sort of brought the music that was there over to the Rose Bowl. That's sort of when things transitioned from the Post over to there.
Yeah. It's quite a expansive history, thinking about the jazz scene in particular, and there was something that stood out to me when I was sort of putting some questions together for this interview. In 2016, you interviewed Shelley, Jeff, and it's included on the Oral History Project on the Nature's Table website. And Shelley, you made a really fascinating point, and I'm going to sort of switch gears to talk about this, and I hope we could talk about this in 3 different capacities here with these 3 venues. But you said something about the table being sort of a, quote, training ground for young musicians. And I wonder, what do you think makes these venues, Nature's Table, Iron Post, the Rose Bowl, sort of a training ground, or as an attractive place for young musicians to play?
You're a kid playing a horn, and you don't know the experience of putting together 3 sets. 3 sets, just the embouchure that you have to have, the playing over people talking and drinking and paying no attention to you. I remember Dave Liebman came from New York, shut the fuck up, motherfucker. Somebody was sitting in the audience. So, and at the table, they could play with their faculty. They played in these mixed ensembles. And just, whether do you announce the name of a piece, the whole performance gestalt, the phenomenology of being the head of a jazz quartet in front of people. You got to practice that. And there weren't many places that you could. And
to this day, I would say, it's hard to make a living. Maybe in the older days you could, but make a living playing music in Champaign-Urbana. And some of the jazz people back in the 70s, 80s, there was a lot of jobbing opportunities. So you could get a gig playing weddings. The Pocket Big Band that played at the Blind Pig forever under John Hutchins' direction, they played weddings all the time. They were like a 10-piece band, and they had gigs, so they could, he could put together stuff and people would get paid. And then people stopped hiring bands, or big bands in particular.
But Jeff, how many of those people actually made, I mean, Hutchins did, but he had the gig at Parkland.
Well, so,
but many of the players, like Helgeson, they
sure. I mean, in Chicago, people were able to make gigs, like play round the clock, even if half of it wasn't what they wanted to do, or 3/4 of it. But the world changed. But nobody ever played at Nature's Table or the Iron Post or the Rose Bowl, I would say,
for money.
To make big money, right? They're playing it because they love the music. I mean, whether it's Nature's Table or the Iron Post or the Rose Bowl, people coming through, people who used to be here, or people who know, hey, there's an appreciative audience. When I booked Zorba's for quite a few years, I'd get Chicago musicians come down and say, hey, these people aren't all jazz fans in the audience, but they would listen. It's like we have a more appreciative audience here than we do at some of our gigs in Chicago. And Chicago is so spread out. It's like it's hard to, if it's a gig on the north side or the south side and you live here, it's like it's hours and hours, especially these days, to travel. But so what's been a common denominator, which Marten talked about a little bit earlier, and Shelley did too, is the audience, is like the feedback, is people who listen and appreciate. So it's one thing to play for $10 and there's nobody there to listen. It's another thing to play for $10 and you're getting feedback and people are listening and appreciating it, or saying, that tune kind of sucked, why don't you do this, instead, or whatever. And that I think makes these venues so much more special, is that there's a closeness. It's like you're not up on a high stage, you're blinded by lights, you can't see. It's you're right there with people.
Yeah. And the Rose Bowl, I know there's student ensembles that are performing there on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, if you want to talk about sort of the idea of training ground, I think that, gosh, I can talk a lot about this, because certainly going back to starting with the Iron Post, I should start there because I really saw it. I mean, like I said, I came in 2000 and my friends were students in the jazz program and they loved jazz. I mean, they ate it up. We were at home listening to jazz records when they weren't at school, studying for it and like playing all the time. And they get their first opportunities to play to a public that's not in academia, in this institution where people are naturally going to be like a quiet seated audience. What Shelley was talking about, you got to play over, you got to grab people's attention, and you've got to learn stage presence. You have to learn how to like talk to a crowd, how to introduce a song. Like she said, put a set together, be able to think about like what's going to get people's attention, what's going to be interesting. And I've seen all kinds of performances that Joey Glassman was here doing vibraphone stuff, and he was doing Radiohead performances, like jazz and Radiohead, and like people doing different things over the years to try to grab the audience and testing out different ideas. I mean, definitely it's a not just a training ground, but a little bit of a laboratory for these students to try out their ideas. And Paul especially, even outside of jazz and like the student base that was here, there'd be groups in there that are 16-year-old rock bands, or kids are 14 and they're playing the Iron Post, and he's just hoping he sells enough baskets of fries and that people are ordering soda pops instead of waters, to try to make enough money for those shows. But he did it. A lot of people had their first opportunities at the Iron Post. A lot of people that I know that, other places that weren't music venues but did have music sometimes, they would never have booked these groups. But definitely groups were born out of being able, that openness where Paul would be like, yeah, come on, you can play a Tuesday night, I'll give you a slot, I need to fill the schedule, like, let's try it out. I mean, like, I think I had a running, before I worked there, I had a running, like, regular Tuesday that went a couple of months. Friends of mine, like, their groups started there, so there was not only this, like, student training of, like, the people who are, like, trying to play out of the context of academia, but there was also community musicians that were able to launch projects because there's a stage there,
right?
It's
Because
a
they had a
venue.
place to
It's
play.
Accessible
It's a
venue. There was an academic piece about Nature's Table, and again, partly it was because I'm a closeted intellectual. The musicians were into polyrhythms.
Yeah.
So I wrote grants and brought African polyrhythmists over into and started kid ensembles of African polyrhythms, but the jazzers studied the polyrhythms. So
Yeah.
it was invested in the rhythmic, in the musical values, trying to up it. I feel like the Rose Bowl's doing some of that. You're getting, you're starting to curate who you bring and foster their careers. So it's
Shelley,
intentional.
Was this the ISYM, or was it something with summer youth music, or
This was
something
just
else?
something we did.
Oh,
So besides jazz was our lifeblood,
yeah.
but we also had blues. We had African music. So there was this band, Oscar Sully had Bantuku. This is a little later. Gideon came in. So these were African musicians who put together bands with students sometimes as well. And so that
This was people who loved music, creating educative, and this wasn't, yeah.
Yeah.
there was talking about Tuesday nights and things like that. So for a period post Nature's Table, I was booking Zorbas, I was booking The Blind Pig, I was booking Gypsy, which is in the space that became Mike and Molly's.
Uh-huh.
I was booking, there was some fucking, the place that is now the Mexican restaurant that was Crane Alley for a long time
In Canton.
was a Mongolian barbecue, and in the back for a while they had a hip hop club that was then doing jazz. So all these people wanted to do jazz, and they came to me, and I was like, listen, you have to make a commitment. You can't just put it in on the slowest night of the week and think all of a sudden you're going to have a big crowd. And I said this to everybody, and then after 3 months, all these people bailed out, and it's okay, it's we tried it, we tried different places, but it's that was the thing. I mean, Terry would, when younger musicians came up, they wouldn't get a Thursday night or a Friday night or a Saturday night, they'd get a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night or a Monday night, and say, having music 7 nights a week is a hard thing, right? Because it's it's a hard hustle to get people to come out, and you have to understand. And again, Nature's Table had this other aspect of its business to get us through, because during the school year, again, we had people eating lunch like crazy. So
The bread.
here's this is a Zorba story, but it applies to other stuff. I'd booked Vicky Capo, who was a singer. She was from town. She used to play at Nature's Table. I booked her at Zorba's, and I booked a quartet. And then she came in with just a duo because she knew the money would be better. And it's God, Vicky, I said, I said a quartet, and just a piano, just Bill French and her.
Yeah.
And
Classic bait and switch.
And the thing about Zorba's was that, just as Nature's Table was, we were not enforcers of laws. We let things happen as they happened. So a lot of younger people came to Zorba's because they knew they could get pitchers of beer. But then they would listen because there was music that was there. But I told Vicky, I said, you might have them the first set, but come that set break, people start getting loud and rowdy, and it's you got to recapture them or else you're lost. And I told her this, and she's like, I got this. And then she went around and she went to table and said, "Shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up." And Vicky just, and she got them back. She got people. She knew how to control that and how to bring that in. And she told people to shut the fuck up, and they were scared. And they shut the fuck up.
Where is it? Do you have
I
a
thought you were
picture?
going to tell a story she came out with this great number and capture, but no.
But she killed it because it was subtle stuff, and she was great, and it was great music. But it's just if you don't know how to control it. And again, that's, for years, they maybe teach this now at the U of I, but they didn't for a long time, of not just how to play the music, but how to put together a set, how to do stuff, how to, don't leave on a ballad, leave on a burner, do the ballad here, do this.
That's Mary
And for
Clark.
years, and I heard so much jazz at Nature's Table, and I started doing a jazz show at WEFT after the table was gone, and there were so many songs I didn't know the name of, because a lot of people weren't announcing shit, and it's oh, I know how that tune goes, I know that tune, but I was like, what's the name of it? I don't know. And it was, and Jeff Helgeson has always been great from day one. We always joked that he should teach this class on how to put together a set, how to know when to announce the band, when to do this stuff. And to this day, I was just at the gig a couple weeks ago at the Rose Bowl with the Table Reunion band, basically. And once again, he knows when to introduce the band. He knows when to take the break. He knows how long not to take a 4-hour break on a 3-hour gig.
Yeah, there's an art form to running a show, to leading a show, and putting a set together. And that's something that you can't learn. You won't learn you won't learn it at the university. You kind of have to experiment and see what works for your style for yourself.
So what's your dream about Rose Bowl now?
My dream?
What's your?
Oh man!
What are you going to say 20 years from now?
Are you,
20 years?
Are you a co-booker or a primary booker, or what is it?
We have someone who books. I mean, there was a time where I was sort of managing a booking, really just for. I should introduce it this way. When we opened the Rose Bowl, we weren't booking every night of the week. That's what I did at the Iron Post, and my business partner Charlie and I, and he's a touring musician. We booked Friday, Saturday. We had like a Wednesday trivia, and we would have the Monday hootenanny, long-standing bluegrass jam. It's like 13, 14 years now. That happens there. But it was really coming out of the pandemic and realizing that, like, the jazz scene needed a new home at the Rose Bowl. They're like, okay, let's just do it. We're gonna book 7 days a week. And there was years, it's maybe just slightly less now, but where we booked 700 shows a year, 750 shows in some years.
It's crazy.
Out of there. And
Are you archiving all this? Are you keeping records of all the gigs?
well, we have records of all the performances that happened. I don't have recordings of everything.
No, but you need to, because us recreating the table schedule, we don't even have all the schedules. We found different bits and pieces. We donated Terry's little notebooks that have things. We don't have, this was a day of posters, which I know you guys don't even make posters, right?
We do. No, we
do.
actually do physical
Okay.
posters. Yeah, we do.
Save them all.
They have
We do
fancy
poster
ones.
runs.
Yeah.
But my dream, really my dream is, it's sustaining this thing. You talked about this jazz crash that happened where the scene the popularity of jazz, took a massive hit at some point in time.
I would say live music.
And live music in general, right? And we're seeing that even more, like coming out of the pandemic and just like Netflix and internet and we're fighting a battle. Really for people's attention. And, people don't know what they're missing because that tradition of live music isn't what it used to be 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years. Keep going back. It's different. And like, we're constantly trying to find ways to bring people out to more shows, to see things that are going to change their minds, like really blow their minds, like stuff that they just don't know that it's there. And we're just trying to like continue to sustain and not to sustain through the same people, it's sustaining through this continual process of rebirth, of bringing people, who are 18 years old who come to town, into the music scene and to like really that culture that's there, that salon culture of hanging out at the table, of like there's real conversation and it's a real place where ideas, and cultural forces can combine, and people that you wouldn't meet otherwise, you're going to interact with and have conversation with around this art that exists. That's my dream for the place, to continue that really community tradition of having a community around music.
Yeah. I think back to the type of posters and things, all the art that was done at the table that you have in your binder in front of you, Shelley, and thinking about the bohemian sort of Greenwich Village-esque space that was the table, and I wonder what that was like living it for both of you that were a part of that, getting to experience both, not just the music and the food and everything else, but the in Irish, the crack, the conversations, the things that people are saying, and the community that's built up and around that. And I wonder about that with the Iron Post, and I wonder about that with Rose Bowl now too. What do we think about this idea of these spaces existing as the bar scene existing as sort of a small slice of Bohemia in Champaign-Urbana?
You go first, Shelley.
Well, that's what it was. The campus town had very little bohemian fringe to it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the conscious idea, is to bring a little bit of that here. I want to say, in the interest of honesty, and I always watch Marten to see if he's hit it yet, there was a period of about 10 years in when we retired. And it was fun still, but it is
became work.
It's,
Yeah.
Well, you also had 4 kids in the
Yeah.
span of
But-
that time too. So
I've seen you drag in
Oh,
where
yeah.
it's just like, you know.
Oh.
well, but it's having collaborators. So like not to toot my own horn, but
you were big
But when
for
when
that.
Terry was able to pass off a lot of responsibilities, not the booking, I didn't book anything until the closing weekend, but he held on to that. But a lot of the other responsibilities, and I think that's what you've learned at the Rose Bowl. You guys have a lot of collaborators to help.
Yeah,
out with
no,
things.
I mean, it was rough. There were a couple of years that were really, really hard. You know, like, it's kind of like what I'm going through now opening this restaurant, but it's like 18-hour days for the first several months. I mean, it's been 6 years now of working 7 days a week with 2 vacations, you know, the number of days off, less than 20 probably in 6 years now, and running a club that's open every day, music almost every day. It never ends. Every day it's like, okay, another show, and then after that, tonight there's another show after that, and then tomorrow there's 2 more shows, and then the next day there's 2 more, and then there was a while where Saturdays, 3 shows on Saturday, and you know, it's the truth of the matter is the people who own the place, they're the only people that are truly reliable in that way, where like people, other like employees, they can be great. And Jeff, I'm sure that you were there, stalwart, but it's hard to find people like that who.
And I wasn't there 7 days a week. I'll tell you
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, but who really?
that was up to
I mean,
Terry usually.
It's like it's staff, engineers. They'll come and go, and you've got to be there to when someone doesn't show up. It's you, you know, and that does wear.
I mean, Terry and Shelley's life revolved around the table. It was get up. Terry would have to go do this. You know, you come
I
in.
tell you that we rinsed the spaghetti for the Sunday spaghetti special in our bathtub. If people, I mean, I kept it clean, but
Yeah.
Public health.
Yeah,
You can't go back in time and
doesn't
prosecute
matter
us for that.
now.
I
mean,
think
there's-
we've reached the statute of limitations for that.
I mean, you do everything, right? You have to do everything. You have to engineer. You've
Yeah.
got to, in your case, like, you know, do whatever you can to get the food prep ready.
just for years walking with this baby stroller, putting up the flyers, handing to
Yeah.
people.
So, again, listening was something that people came to Nature's Table for.
Yeah.
Now, did we have people who were underage come drink? Sure. But they also knew that they had to respect what was going on. And they knew that part of the deal was that they'd have to listen to jazz.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they went out and bought a bunch of, John Coltrane records afterwards, but they came to appreciate it and understand it. And we would see people do that all the time. Come in with some friends and then not know what to expect and then be there. I mean, some people would talk through this stuff, some people would talk loudly, that would that would happen. But some of those people could be the biggest fans in the world. They're just, had a few
Excited.
beers or excited to see some people and talk. But it was definitely, that's why we, being open in the days, our times, like the post-lunch rush, pre-evening, and like we always tried to get a dinner thing happening, and it never worked. It never really took off because it was campus.
Yeah.
So people had left. And that, for years, I'm no longer in this position now, for the past 20 years or longer now, where I'm not in the service industry anymore, but the blessing and the curse of students in this town. It's like fucking students, but it's like, the fucking students. It's like we need them to sustain our business and to be part of it. Not just the students, but the teachers, because they leave. It's, other
it's
people
everything,
leave.
yeah.
It's like things shut down for a while, and that's the nature of this community.
Yeah.
And, it was always a thing. It's like, well, hey, it's it's slow in town now. You can get a place to park, but then there's nobody coming out. It's
Yeah.
like you need people like that. So, it was great. Green Street used to have a lot of live music
Yeah.
back in the day, and there's nothing. There's been nothing for years, and not just jazz, but any kind of music. And Canopy Club somehow is still chugging along there on campus for a long time. But there are very few other music venues. Even downtown Champaign, which used to be a hub, has now got fits and spurts of some stuff, but there's no venue there.
Right.
I mean, the venue. I mean, Canopy Club is more of a touring place thing. The venue is the Rose Bowl. I mean, that's where people know that they're going to be able to go hear music. And it comes and goes. And the scene used to be able to sustain a lot of stuff. I mean, if you go back and look at like the DI or the News Gazette from the 80s and look at the ads, and you could just see, I mean, there was a whole entertainment section that the Gazette used to run, and the DI for a while too. There was all this live music that was happening all over. So that wasn't, as Martin was mentioning earlier, that was the thing you did. You know, you went out and
Went to
you
see a
socialized,
show.
you heard stuff. But the table was never seen as one of the bars that you would go to. It wasn't like a bar crawl place. Like that would be T-Birds that was up the road, you know.
Why do you think that was?
Because we weren't, well, one, we didn't serve hard liquor. It
Yeah.
was just a beer and wine place. And I'm sure that was mostly an
There was
economic
music,
thing.
there were, funky people.
Yeah.
I mean, cops never, like, came by to check on stuff. Like, we didn't have, like, I know the world's different now, and enforcement's different, but we didn't have people, like, do walkthroughs or whatever or anything at the table. It was just, like, because nothing, like, the stuff that happened, we usually took care of. It wasn't, like, cop calling kind of stuff.
Terry had been a felon. He was, and you don't give liquor license to felons.
Yeah.
But Jeff Mayor Markland knew him as a football hero, and Terry was a nice guy. And, the drug that he was a felon for is now legal in the land. So let's just put that into perspective here. We're not importing heroin, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, so we had that relationship with at least the police department in Urbana and the mayor. They loved this guy. He'd been a local hero.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little bit of that.
I mean,
Protection.
and again, like the faculty thing. I mean, lots of faculty came, and they got to do stuff at the table that they couldn't do as their day job.
Yeah.
Play in a small group, do whatever, stretch out. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Like you're talking about, like Sal Martirano and Morgan Powell and Ray Sasaki.
Shab.
Those guys, that all worked for them. There was
Yeah.
there was a professor, there was a composition person who came in and did something, and it didn't really work. But he brought people, so.
Very gushy and his moldy figs. Yeah, there were a lot of.
I'm not gonna name the person because it's a good anecdote, but it's a after hours anecdote.
I mean, it's a good question though. Thinking about your favorite actor, the favorite group that came through, but it's just as important, I think, to think about. Is there an anecdote that that there was just a total failure of a show, just an awful, and we don't have to name names or anything, but I think that would be a really fascinating thing to think about. Especially as considering it as sort of a training ground. If that's what these venues are.
Oh boy. Now I have to purge this story out of my head because that's the one that's running through it.
There's the classic story of Charlie Parker in Kansas City where he gets laughed off the stand because
Yeah,
he
yeah,
just
yeah,
can't
yeah.
blow the changes.
Yeah.
And he wood-shudded for a few years, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Well, so Nature's Table existed in a moment in time and a moment in a geographical space where there weren't a million clubs in the Chicago suburbs.
Yeah.
So people were still making trips from Chicago to St. Louis. So we'd get some people who would stop by that
The
because-
Fertile Delta, yeah.
On that circuit,
Chicago,
yeah.
St.
Mhm.
Louis,
Yes,
and
yeah.
Tuesday night we'll play there.
Mm-hmm.
So that would happen, and because of that, we had a couple people who were exiles from Chicago, mostly for drug reasons, and wanted to get out of the environment and came down here. The most famous one being Guido Sinclair,
Yeah.
But
who
Lynn
became
Halliday,
Yeah.
Lynn Halliday, and then there was Raphael Garrett. But there were people who came, and some of them became house musicians, right? So they were there. Somebody canceled. Terry said, "Guido, can you put together a band? Can you do this?" Now Guido had kicked heroin, smoked a lot of pot, drank too much. So sometimes it's a question of where he was in that zone. So some of the gigs he put together to keep the music happening didn't always work. And then he would go through cycles where he would burn out his musicians
Yeah.
from taking a bigger share, doing whatever. And so there would be sometimes brand new musicians show up to do stuff and who had never played with him before. And, young students who not necessarily, you can know how to play a tune doesn't mean you can just do it right off the bat, or you have a real book in front of you and play it. So some of those gigs didn't work. Or when Guido had like 103 fever and insisted on still playing his gig, and he was and he was probably drunk on top of it, and
Wow.
and he started singing a lot. He was a sax player, started singing a lot, which he could carry a tune, but it got into some like out there like fever dream kind of stuff.
And there were, the Sainted Rondeau didn't want people walking onto his sets, and when Guido tried to play with Ron walked off, just left. There was so stuff like that would go down.
Yeah.
There was some backstage, punching and knives, and occasionally, at least once, and things like that. There was one time. Guido's long gone, so I'll tell a Guido story. So Guido was friends with people like Von Freeman and George Freeman from Chicago, and Von was a heavy dude, and Von took no shit, but he was beloved because he was great and he knew how to be with people and stuff. And him and Guido had connections way back. Guido brought him down. Guido was like the booker or whatever. Brought him down. Super big crowd. Guido taking the door, and then Guido paying the band out at the end of the night. And table was small. We had two bathrooms, the big bathroom and the small bathroom, and they were right next to each other. And the big bathroom was, in theory, the handicap bathroom, but it wasn't that big. And end of the night, Von gets the money, and he looks, he goes, He goes, come in my office. And he takes Guido into the office. You hear, and then Von coming out, counting the money. And he's like, it's okay now.
Wow.
Stories.
And I'm sure Guido took a slice, or a bigger slice than he was supposed to.
Alison Krauss playing at the table. I don't know, this is just a story that came to mind. Her dad didn't trust anybody to take the cover. So Papa Krauss would sit there. I usually took cover, and he would count it and do it. He was tighter than a tick for his.
There's one of our friends, Brad Wheeler, who still plays to this day. He moved back in town many years ago and plays at the Rose Bowl. I found a poster with his first gig, and the cover was 50 cents. That's when cover was often $1, but it was 50 cents, and it was. So I don't know why the fuck Terry made 50-cent cover, because you have to give out quarters to be able to fill out a bunch of quarters in their pocket.
I don't remember.
But I remember when the Mudhens, who were a big blues band, and they had a period where they would pack Mabel's, and because they played all these frat parties, they were big, and then Mabel's was kind of going downhill, and they played a gig at the table, which was not their normal venue, but they played there, and then afterwards, I think it was Bruiser, the leader of the band, said, we made more money tonight than we make at a regular Mabel's gig. That's because we gave them 100% of the door, and it wasn't heavily sliced up.
How does the Rose Bowl deal with cover?
We do a number of things. So this kind of goes back to, this is sort of like two weird music things. I worked at the Post a lot, and there were, Paul would have a door guy for most shows.
Mm-hmm.
The cover would be like $2, or it'd be $5. And I remember when the cover for SSG went from $5 to $7, and some people stopped coming.
Yeah.
You can believe that. And you think about inflation, and how cover charge hasn't matched inflation by any stretch of the imagination.
We were charging $2 at Nature's Table in the 80s.
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly. And so out of that, and what my business partner Charlie, as a touring musician, what he'd seen in New Orleans and stuff, is that we found out pretty quickly that if we could avoid running a cover charge, the musicians do better running a tip bucket. Because people, if you charge a $5 cover, some people pay $5, but if you run the bucket, almost everybody's going to give a few dollars, and some people will throw a 10, they'll throw a 20 in there.
Is that only with older audiences, or does it work with younger audiences?
It works with it varies. It works with the younger audiences too, because we've accommodated the younger audiences where they can scan a QR code, they can tip on their bar tab, where we get Venmo, we get tips directly in the register that then get paid out to the musicians instead of just the cash, because obviously cash is just not as much of a thing. Crazy changes. But we do a combination of stuff. So we'll do like a guarantee against a tip bucket. We'll do just a flat guarantee. We'll do we have ticketed shows where it's, you know, a guarantee plus some of the back end after house expenses. And so we run, you know, almost every model under the sun, and we just match it to what is going to work, and we try to optimize how the payments, how the band gets paid per show, per what the crowd is. And a lot of, you know, running a venue is knowing like these little things, like, you know, okay, so like these 2 weeks in August is kind of our lull, or the first 2 weeks of the year in January we book all locals, or the between Christmas and New Year's it's all locals, or we could do the touring bands more heavy in September and October, and we've got to run. And that comes down to the cover charge too. It's like, okay, which model is going to work for which group? Like, can we really get enough pre-sale tickets for this group that's coming in, or do we just let people in and we run the bucket and we'll make more money for the band that way?
Yeah.
And so it's all these little things that kind of add up to carefully managing those that makes it work.
So is having the name and the legacy of the Rose Bowl a blessing or a curse?
Oh my God, I should talk about
because Nature's Table and the Iron Post were their own things, their own names.
I should talk about that. When we bought the place, it was a music venue before, and it was Sonny Norman and the Driftin' Playboys. They played there. Sonny Norman was the owner of the bar. Him and his wife Ruth owned it, and he played there 5 nights a week.
It's a country music bar. Yeah.
He was a singer and a guitar player, and they played 3 or 4 hours 5 nights a week. It's before my time. But it was when he passed away, his wife tried to run it for a couple years and sold it to the guy who I bought it from. And the place had live music, and a very active live music, and it sort of just kind of went down. And it was sort of a private club, you know, for these old washed out bikers, you know. And these guys were just, they didn't want anybody. It really was restrictive. There were a lot more people there when Sonny owned it, but like, if you had long hair, like, they'd just kick you out.
I got kicked out.
They wouldn't let you in.
I got not let in.
Yeah, they wouldn't let you in.
And I had the shortest hair of the guys I was with.
Wow.
Yeah, if you had long hair, you weren't allowed in there, basically.
Well, I wasn't told I couldn't come in. They just said we need 2 forms of ID.
This
is in the
had
80s,
ways
and it's like,
yeah.
2 forms of ID. I barely got my fucking driver's license.
Now we need that. Now we need that to vote in this country.
Yeah, and so it had that reputation as like a really unwelcoming space, and like not hostile. I mean, a reputation as a hostile space.
Yeah.
And even when we bought it, that sort of carried over. But these guys have like aged out. They're crowded. They're like old.
Did you think about changing the name?
No,
that never.
No, we didn't. We didn't think about changing the name. You know, the agreement that we had with the former owner was to try to some degree, continue some of the legacy that was there out of respect. You know, and I think
Fair enough.
But how do you do that? When
we had really
have a
hoped that we would
community
try to bridge this gap of like, because you know, like my business partner Charlie, he was part of the Hootenanny. They had probably their busiest night of the week was the Monday they used to be closed that they took over, and we wanted to bridge this gap of like what was going on there musically before and then what we were doing, and it was impossible. You know, the cultural shifts that had happened in terms of just like acceptance of, you know, like gay rights, acceptance of, you know, different people, and like the more cosmopolitan nature that this town is now of international students, and that kind of hostility. It's not that the people who were still there at the Rose Bowl, they just weren't interested in having an open mind.
Yeah.
And so they went, like the few of them that were left, they drink at the American Legion 100 feet away, 100 yards away.
Yeah.
They're not really there anymore. There still are some people who are, you know, come to shows now who have been going to the Rose Bowl for 30 years. And there still is that component, but like truly trying to bridge that gap of like the regular clientele that we had at the time that we opened, it would have been smarter to just move on right away. And the people that still wanted to come and had been coming there for music for 20, 30 years or more would have still come. And these other people that we don't want them around anymore anyway.
Yeah.
Honestly, but it was different. And we brought it back to being a live music venue from a place that was a music venue that had died.
Yeah.
You know, they were closed on New Year's Eve.
Right.
Like they didn't do the thing anymore. They picked up what they could. If somebody asked, they'd have a show, but it really wasn't like it was when we birthed something new out of it, you know.
So
Speaking of live music, just before I
Yeah,
forget
go,
again,
go.
I'd like to hear Chachi do a night of jazz standards.
You know what? I'm working on it. I've got the old nature. Shelley has been kind enough to let me have the Mason Hamlin that she mentioned earlier. That was at the table. I play it every day,
Good.
and I'll be doing a jazz show, hopefully sometime into January.
So this is an anecdote, but to speak on the reputation. I mean, Nature's Table has an outsized reputation in some ways. I mean, people will talk about it, you know, people who are musicians, working musicians, teachers all over the place. I think the Iron Post has that too, because it's a place where people got to learn. I'm sure the Rose Bowl has as well. So this is 1986.
Mm-hmm.
I was visiting Zambia. It was my girlfriend at the time. Her mother was working for a Swedish aid agency. We were mostly around the capital, but at one point this is during apartheid. It's a frontline state. It's where the African National Congress was headquartered, so I was told no political shirts. No political shirts. And we're at one point, we drove up north to go to a small village, and we're in a Land Rover, and we're just driving in this little Land Rover. It's her mother, her, myself, and a couple other guys. And I'm looking at this one African dude, and I'm like, God, that dude looks familiar, but it's like, that's insane, right? How could I know this person? And I'm wearing a Sorghum t-shirt. And Sorghum was this jazz funk band that played at Nature's Table, Russell Cheatham, Chuck Tripp, and that. And after a while, the guy's looking at me, and we're in the back of this thing, we're bouncing around, and he's like, Sorghum, Nature's Table, Chuck Tripp, I used to go there. And it turned out he was one of the African students who used to come to hear Sorghum, to hear Oscar Sullick. There was a lot of Africans. So he did look familiar because I'd waited on him at Nature's Table. And I was like, oh my God, we're in the middle of Zambia. And this dude went to Nature's Table and hung out there. So I don't know if I ever told you that story.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I was like, no way can I know this dude. It's just...
Well, thinking about this, defining a space and having that sort of outsized personality or understanding that the Nature's Table restaurant, embodied jazz. This was the place that you went to go and hear this thing. And to some extent, Iron Post did this, but they also brought in other types of music and other types of things to fill out the remaining part of the week. And I know the Rose Bowl is fairly diverse in terms of the type of programming. And I just wonder, is this reflective, this change from sort of, you have a space in Champaign-Urbana, Rose Bowl was a country venue, Nature's Table was this jazz venue, so was Trino's was this jazz place. Transforming from spaces that specify on a particular style or genre of music to something that has to become more diverse to allow for more audiences. I'm wondering, have you seen this tracking, or is this just all speculation on my part?
Well, so the table, definitely in the later years, we experimented more. We had to, because the jazz audience, people had kids. Mm-hmm. People, the regulars from the early years got older, they had other responsibilities, they didn't come as much. There was a period, my friend Brian Ruth, who worked there, we got Terry to do Rock and Roll Mondays. Mm-hmm. And Hum, an early version of Hum, before, when Andy Switsky was still in it, played on a Monday night.
Wow.
I think Poster Children played. I mean, a bunch of these bands, because Poster Children used to play at Allen Hall. Yeah. It was loud as fuck. I didn't usually go there for those because it was really loud. So that was a big thing. I mean, we had Irish folk sessions that would happen there on a regular basis, like every Sunday. Or maybe once a month. And then we had lots of blues bands. Yeah. We had like R&B bands. We had the African bands. Jazz still had at least one weekend night, mm-hmm. and it had multiple nights during the week. But we did mix it up. We did have other things. So there were people who came for other stuff. There was even this guy, Tony, the reggae guy who played solo reggae, came down from Madison. There was Peter Madcat Ruth, who was a blues harmonica player, who came. Allison Krause in Union Station played there when she was in high school. Yeah. I mean, there's actually, it's a really crappy, but it's a video that's circulated that's from Nature's Table. It's really low lo-fi audio. But I was like, holy shit, there's some video of Alison Krauss from playing there.
If a venue is really open and there's people will come, they will. The players will want to come. Whether you can build an audience for them is another story. But
Yeah, well, see, the jazz then that was happening, there weren't as many people coming to it unless it was on a weekend, and that's why then it was relying more on bringing back the names from Chicago would come on the weekend and stuff like that, because people weren't coming out as much. Because partially, again, at that point, there were so many options to hear live music. I mean, one, you didn't have to go hear live music, but if you were going to hear live music, there was a ton of places to go. So we definitely, I mean, not as much, I would say, as the Iron Post did for a period. Because for a period, especially early on, Paul was trying a lot of different stuff. I think Paul was trying to do more touring bands, which was what, which he realized that the economics wouldn't work out. You just couldn't get enough seats to cover unless you're going to charge a bunch of money, and people are tight. And I remember, SSG, there were times I was in there, I was like, this shit could fly in New York. This when they were all happening, when it was unbelievable music, and to pay $5 or $7, it's like that's nothing.
well, the trad band with Mike Miller and Morgan and that could be in New York too.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of music that was incredible.
And then the Rose Bowl, probably the most diverse of the lot.
Right.
Baked into Marten and them's business plan is to do that. But you have to do it. You can't be just one thing, really, anymore, I would say, because you have to get different audiences. Because you can't get, if you see the same people every night, I mean, there's going to be some people who are regulars.
And it's the size of the market here too, right? It's like, maybe in New Orleans you can have a place that does trad every day, day in, day out, because enough people, enough tourism. But in a town like this, you have, at this point in time, you got to be diverse.
You have to diversify.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it did. I was trying to think about this as, yes, there's a through line for jazz that, there is the continuation between all three of these venues. But, the diversity component is something that I think is missing from the story. And I'm trying to think about how we can define a space by a style of music. Is it possible, or is it, pointless to do so, but for a sort of a financial reason in terms of sustainability, especially for the Rose Bowl.
Well, we were branded as a jazz club. I mean, Jazz at Nature's Table, jazz. Yeah. I mean, that was what started and sustained the operation, but it was jazz and beyond, right? It was jazz and more. Yeah. And it was other stuff. We probably didn't have any heavy metal, but I can't think of something that we didn't have there. Yeah. And it may not have played all the time, but but it happened.
I'm worried about Scott. He's been standing for 3 hours here, so
we're getting to 3.
Oh, we are. Okay. We should wrap up then. I want to thank all three of you for being here. This has been wonderful, a really great and productive conversation. A lot of really fun stories that I'd never heard of before, and great things. Thank you once more for being here on behalf of the center.